Welcome to Wednesday's TimesCast. Tonight, Florida's 3 Senate contenders face off in a televised debate, but many of the arguments have already been heard across the airwaves.
I'm as bad as conservative as you can get.
We look at the campaign strategy behind the message. And why does the Florida race attract so much national attention?
I think part of it is just that, especially since the recount in the presidential election of 2000, people have just been sort of fascinated by what happens in Florida politics.
And we look at the search giant's big step onto the small screen with Google TV.
It's going to be quite the marketing challenge for Google to sell this to consumers.
Tonight, Florida's 3 Senate candidates face off in a televised debate, but many of the arguments have already been heard in Florida living rooms.
I'm Damian Cave reporting for the New York Times in Miami. And like a lot of Floridians these days, when I turn on my television set, almost all I see are political ads.
I'm Kendrick Meek and I approve this message.
I'm as bad as conservative as you can get. I'm a Jeb Bush Republican. President Bush.
This spot actually stands out because it captures the state of what's become a pretty surprising three-way race. Initially, it looked like Marco Rubio would beat Charlie Crist to become the Republican nominee, thanks in part to Tea Party activists. Then Charlie Crist surprised everyone by leaving the Republican Party to run as an independent, thrilling Democrats who initially thought this would split the Republican Party. But that's not what happened. Charlie Crist and Kendrick Meek these days are busy battling it out for the left and the middle, while Marco Rubio runs ads showing his support for ideas that no one could possibly oppose, like the American dream.
My parents lost everything. Their home, families, friends, even their country. But they found something too. America.
And Wednesday's debate, in fact, could change the storyline yet again. With Marco Rubio seeming to be the frontrunner, he could soon become the one that everyone decides to gang up on, the role previously played by Charlie Crist. I actually talked to Governor Crist on Friday, and he emphasized, for example, Mr. Rubio's flip-flops on immigration. Initially, Mr. Rubio rejected the new Arizona law and then later said he would support it. Social Security is also likely to be a common line of attack for Mr. Meek and Mr. Crist. Both of them have criticized Mr. Rubio for his plans to reform Social Security, possibly with cutbacks in the future. This line of attack appeared just yesterday in a new ad from Charlie Crist.
Rubio wants to raise the Social Security retirement age. That means you'll work harder and longer for your money.
Not surprisingly, the Rubio campaign immediately said that the ad was the act of a desperate candidate. But it seems clear to most Floridians that this kind of commercial is exactly what they're going to see a lot of between now and Election Day.
Kate, there's a lot of obvious interest tonight in this debate in Florida, 3-man Senate race, nationally televised race. What is it about Florida that seems so fascinating to everyone?
Well, I think part of it is just that, especially since the recount in the presidential election of 2000, people have just been sort of fascinated by what happens in Florida politics. It's also a big state, and it plays a huge factor in any presidential race. So people look there to see what trends might be coming in the next 2 years.
And you also had the dynamic of the Tea Party really making a statement right before the primary, essentially forcing the governor to switch parties.
Right, and I think what's also interesting is that now we've seen Marco Rubio, who the Tea Party helped to anoint, really distance himself and say, I'm not a Tea Party candidate. He's really trying to appeal more to the independents, which a lot of people said the Tea Party candidates would have to do in the general election.
Google is gambling on what has troubled many other tech companies, the TV set. Brian Stelter and David Carr on whether consumers will embrace Google on another screen.
So Brian, you and I spend far too much time on our laptops, and when we do, we spend a lot of time with Mother Google. And now I hear that they're getting into the television business. Is that true?
They are. It's called Google TV. It was announced earlier this year, and then on Monday they announced all these content partnerships to really enliven this device.
So in a sense, Google TV is a lot more like what they've done with phones, where you have to buy specific hardware, you get the software from them, put them together, and you have a new experience. I can't just open up my TV and type in google.com and it opens up to a brand new world, right? You got to buy a doodad.
You either have to have a brand new TV, which is going to cost a lot, or a new set-top box, which is probably going to cost hundreds of dollars. It's going to be quite the marketing challenge for Google to sell this to consumers.
What will consumers get out of it, though? What Google's ability to search?
Google's ability to search and organize your TV in a better way. You know, there's a lot of content online that we're going to start to want to see on our television sets.
The television business has been hard for technology. Just talk to Steve Jobs, who's been banging on TV forever with Apple TV to not very good effect. What's Google going to do?
Well, they've got a few deals that they've announced. They've got a deal with CNBC to make it possible to look at your stocks on the screen next to the live broadcast. A deal with NBA, a deal with Twitter, with some different web video companies. But a lot of of the big networks are missing from the announcements they made this week, and it's going to take time, I think, for Google to make these existing networks comfortable with this new technology hotshot in town.
I think it's not just the TV companies that are uncomfortable. As consumers, I think we're seeing Google show up in ever more aspects of our lives. About the time I turn off the TV and I notice that the time on my alarm clock is brought to me by Google, I'm going to start to get worried.
Join us again tomorrow for another edition of TimesCast.